Well, I'm excited that we're going to talk about a very hot topic lately, last few years, especially. You
Hmm.
guys ever notice that almost everyone and their mother thinks people are a narcissist?
Or everyone and their mother is a narcissist.
Yeah. Or a little from column A, a little from column B.
Basically, I feel like that's what's been happening
Mm.
is there's this term. It's almost like all of a sudden we all know it. Like this word hasn't existed before, and now all of a sudden this is a new word. It's like
Yeah.
someone just made it up in the dictionary. You go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, every other reel from even, not even relationship experts, not even psychologists. It's like, are you in love with a narcissist? Are you a
Mhm.
narcissist? They're a narcissist. You know what the problem with is? You're attracted to narcissists.
Totally, totally. And like, it's really interesting because, I mean, a couple things, right? Like, so there's a difference between narcissistic traits that every single one of us can exhibit, here or there, and like full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, which is actually a disorder. However, people who have full-blown NPD
Mhm.
typically don't seek help, right? So how do we know, right? Who is like an actual clinical narcissist diagnosed in that way? We don't, right? So
Although I feel like a lot of us has somehow gotten our master's degree in family psychology, and how all of a sudden through
yeah.
TikTok and Instagram, we're all therapists, right? So we can diagnose people on our own. And here's the thing. We do have our own anecdotal evidence. Like even when I refer to certain exes of mine or certain people that were in my life, I always will preference like undiagnosed narcissist.
That's good.
Like this is
Yeah.
a person who is like an undiagnosed narcissist.
Hmm.
Because again, like they don't go to therapy. It only has to do with like what I've said to my therapist and them go, well, based on everything you're saying, I think this person's
Hmm.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that happens, but I think a lot of people are trying to go around right now diagnosing. And I think the more important thing, and what I hope people get from this episode, is how to spot narcissistic behavior in other people and in ourselves,
Yeah.
and how to notice the tactics, how to notice what that is, and then how to remove yourself, how to not be attracted to it, how to notice it, and how to remove yourself. Because here's the
Hmm.
thing, we can't control other people, we can only control ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times us or other and people saying like they're a narcissist, they're this, they're that, is really a way of deflecting the fact of like what the work that we have to do, because we have our own accountability and being these dynamics continuously.
Ding, 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 ding. That's it. And I mean, I share this from personal experience. Like I believe that I have had at least two relationships with people that are full-blown narcissists.
Yeah.
And then some with people that just had some traits of narcissism. But like you're right, it's quite a distraction, right? To figure out what's going on with them over there. Like what's going on with them and what's their problem, and is it, are they to blame? It's not me, it's them, right? And in session with one of my clients today, it was funny because he's like, I'm trying to figure out, like, am I the toxic one, or were my ex-wives the toxic ones? And I'm like, there's no like one person's a toxic one person isn't. Like there's shades of gray everywhere,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a dynamic. And so if we're looking for someone to blame, or we're looking for there to be sides, then we're missing the entire point of what's here for us to learn. Because there are personality traits of people who have narcissistic personality disorder, which I think you have like a checklist that maybe we could share.
Oh, we are going to go into this. We are
Good,
going to go into the differences.
good. Yeah. And also, I learned actually this past year that narcissism and emotional immaturity can narcissism and emotional immaturity can present in very similar ways, right? And so I was getting all caught up with it. I was like, well, is he a narcissist or is he just emotionally immature? And the person I was speaking with was like, it doesn't matter, because no matter what, it's not healthy for you. And I was like,
Exactly.
so whatever is going on, narcissist, not a narcissist, right? If you're in a dynamic where you're questioning that and there's enough for you to go off of, that you're in enough distress that you're even asking this question, that's important information to pay attention to, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing is so the first thing I want to address is like, is everyone narcissistic and is it all bad? Right.
Yeah.
And so the fact is when you, especially because you were talking about emotional immaturity. So if you were to think of a baby is technically like the most narcissistic thing you could think of, right? Because they are just thinking about their needs. They cannot take care of themselves. So they are actually like whining and crying and just me. That's right. Like all the baby can think about is themselves. That's fine. But it's for their own preservation. It's for their own survival that at first you have to. So it's interesting when you talk about emotional maturity because yes, like a child who doesn't have all the tools yet to learn selfless behavior, to learn being part of a group, to learn community, right? They don't learn that till later on. They are inherently more selfish because they need to ask for their needs. They need to have that, especially if maybe it was a caregiver who isn't providing for them, whatever. So there are times where selfishness and narcissism isn't a horrible thing. You know, for example, like being self-confident, talking yourself up when you need to, being able to celebrate yourself. Like in order to be motivated and get ahead, sometimes we need like a little bit of like narcissism, or what people could categorize as ego, to keep us sustained and to keep us from dropping into like negative self-talk. Okay. That's when it's adaptive, when it's fine and we know how to use it. It becomes maladaptive when we're doing things like being super competitive, when we're willing to like push someone else down so that we can raise up because of our own insecurities, when we're being aggressive or angry, when we're using manipulation tactics. That's maladaptive, like narcissistic behaviors. And that's the kind of stuff that we want to look out for. And this is good to first look at ourselves to be like, okay, where do I use these things? Right. I actually just recently did a lot of journaling and a lot of work around like, where's my own narcissism? You know, what's it me? Like, how can I recognize it in myself so I stop attracting it to you and stop being okay with that kind of behavior? And the kind of behavior that, why did I find this attractive? Right? Some people do. But I just want to first off by stating that is that like not everything that you would categorize as like narcissistic behavior always needs to be this super negative thing.
But I think there's a difference though, right? Like I wouldn't even use the word narcissistic for that.
That's what I'm saying. But it technically self and ego, then yeah.
Because it's thrown around. It's really thrown around, right? It's like, oh, he's a narcissist. Well, she's a narcissist. And like you hear it all the time. And it's kind of a big thing to throw around, right? But at the same time, it can be very dangerous, right? Like I've had, relationships that were extremely dangerous and toxic situations because of this dynamic, right? And also too, there's like this complementary energy between like a narcissistic, someone with NPD, and like a person who maybe doesn't have a strong sense of self-worth or doesn't really value themselves or has had to work really hard for love, who is just used to accepting breadcrumbs. So you may not necessarily be exhibiting that narcissistic energy yourself, but you may be complementing it because of actually being like almost like an overly nice, like overly giving, overly accommodating person, right? Because those energies just find each other like a magnet.
Oh, totally. And, maybe like, and that's why I mentioned when a baby is being narcissistic and maybe because their caregiver isn't meeting their needs. So yes, that might be why later on in life, they're very attractive to the kind of person that isn't meeting their needs, who is very narcissistic and manipulative because it's something that they were used to. But yeah, I just say those things because that's the difference in narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic behavior. Every single person on this planet, besides maybe a monk, exhibits some form of narcissistic behavior. The big differences have to do with accountability, relationships with others, and context and time. And that, when I was doing a little research on this, you know, you've done a lot of research on this too, because it's something that's come up for us over the years with clients. That's what comes up every single time. And so the first thing is accountability. Someone who exhibits narcissistic behaviors will most likely be able to take accountability and understand where they're hurting others and how. And they're not necessarily going to like it. So they'll be like, oh my goodness, I hurt my family member or my husband or my girlfriend because I did these things. Oh man, maybe I need to change. Like, yeah, I guess that was selfish of me. So they notice these things and they're like, I don't want to hurt the people in my life. This is affecting my relationship. Something needs to change. That's narcissistic behavior and accountability. Someone with a narcissistic personality will not look at themselves in that way. They won't be able to say, yes, I've done all this wrong, and take true accountability. And the reason why I say that is, we'll get into the next one when it comes more relationship with others. Yes, there might be like fake accountability where it's a manipulation tactic. But remember, like, accountability also has to do with change. So taking true accountability, taking real accountability means you then don't repeat the same behaviors intentionally, and that you try to change after you recognize it. And someone who has narcissistic personality, they won't do that.
No,
they don't even like to take any blame.
Yeah, they're not actually capable of doing it.
Yeah,
because it's like, from what I understand, and like, please add in anything here, but like, what creates a narcissist is that there's like an extremely traumatic event as a very young child, and so they have a splitting of their personality. And so part of it goes into this like wounded child that's like holding all the trauma, and the other part splits into this like grandiose piece where it's like covering up and protecting the little wounded child and the trauma energy. So in order for this piece, this part, to be accountable, would be interpreted as like, it's too risky, like it's going to be death for an exposure of this part. So therefore it's not going to happen. And it's wild because, you know, when you're in that situation, they're likely gaslighting you, and then you start gaslighting yourself. Like, am I crazy? Like, what's happening? Is what I'm think happening not happening? Because it's like just this complete lack of accountability. And so that's a really telltale sign.
It is. It's one of the biggest, because narcissists lack empathy. And that's where accountability typically comes from, is someone's ability to have empathy for the other person and recognize how they affected that person in a really negative way. And so the higher empathy you have, the more you're able to take accountability. And hence why narcissists will go. So a person with true narcissism will go for someone who is super empathetic, because they're going to constantly take on all the blame, because they're going to be like, oh, but like, he's wounded or she's wounded and she needs me to save her. And but she had a really rough childhood and she didn't have a dad. And right? So they will make up excuses, and they'll be like, I need to do these things. And the narcissist in return will be like, yeah, no, I do need all of that. Yeah, you do need to do all of this for me. And no, it's actually your fault. Like, I didn't really do. I'm sorry that you're hurt by by what I like. I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt, but like, I needed to do what I need to do. Like, that's kind of how. Thinking situations where they're like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Right.
Not I'm sorry that I did anything to hurt you. Not I'm sorry that you missed your boundaries or was manipulative or gaslit you, whatever it may be, right? It's typically just like, yeah, that sucks. That sounds like you might need to go to therapy for that. Yeah, you should try that. You know, and so a lot of narcissists too, and like you mentioned in the beginning, a true narcissist won't necessarily be in therapy. And they might go for a little bit amount of time and then stop once they meet that wall. So I'm glad you talk about the trauma and the splitting, because basically the way my therapist had explained it to me when I was talking to her about several people in my life that I, you know, that she made me realize were most likely, especially one in particular, was most likely someone with full MPD, is they have this wall to protect the guilt and the shame. So underneath all of that, from whatever happened in their childhood, there's an intense amount of guilt and shame. And so the ego wall becomes really, really high and super, super thick. And
Yeah.
as time goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse. And
Hmm.
that's why time is a factor in this, is because someone can continue to do narcissistic behaviors. And then the more and more they do it, the less and less accountable they become. And that wall grows thicker, it grows higher. And then, yeah, maybe eventually they end up having MPD.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is some intervention time. So there are small grace periods, but yeah, accountability is like the first sign. When
Hmm.
you're dealing with someone, you bring something to them. Are they able to take accountability? Are they able to have
Hmm.
empathy for you
Hmm.
and see your side, or even feel bad that you feel this way in some way? Are they willing to work through it or work it out? Or is it constantly turned around and it's your fault?
Exactly. That piece. So that's another big piece of it, right? And if you, it's interesting, right? Because if you grown up in a home where maybe you were the black sheep or the scapegoat or the problem of the family, it feels real familiar, right? So then it's like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem, right? And that's where go back to the black and white. There's never just one person. It's a dynamic between two people. So
Mhm.
if you find like you're overly responsible for what's happening, then that's important to look at too. And these things are just, you can apply this to everyday relationships as well, right? Like I just got off the phone with my coach and she was saying, basically the first 90 days of relating with someone, you don't know, right? And you get to gather information and see. And where you really get to know someone is when you see, like, when something comes up and a challenge comes up, how do they meet that?
Mhm.
Right? Like, I was just dating someone for a few months. Everything was great. And it was really beautiful and sweet and safe until it wasn't, because something came up and it was like, then you can see kind of how much work they've done, their ability to sit with all the pieces that are there, whether it's guilt or shame, their ability to communicate, ability to like avoid finger pointing, like all of these things. And you just won't know. So that's why it can be hard when getting to know people and like in the early stages of dating, because you just don't know like what's here. How's this gonna go? We don't know. We
Yeah.
have to see.
You have to see their conflict resolution, but like you
Yeah.
said, you don't know how they handle conflict until it comes up. And then you don't know how they resolve conflict.
Yep.
So humility and the ego are opposites, right? So someone
Mhm.
who has this large sense of ego that's super, super protective is going to find it very difficult to take accountability. Where someone
Yeah.
who has enough humility and enough empathy, they're going to be able to sit back and be like, oh, okay, I
Mhm.
did something and I need to apologize for it and I need to make it right.
Yeah. And I want to really say, so there's a difference between accountability and apologizing. So I see this confused a lot, right? It's like, oh, I'm being accountable. I apologized, right? No, like that might be a piece of accountability, but it's not the whole thing, because accountability is actually really deeply listening to the person who's opposite you and really hearing and understanding the impact of your actions, even if your intention was different, right? Because, oh, I had the best intentions. Oh, I didn't mean that. Okay, we get that, and there was still an impact, right?
Yeah,
So
and taking accountability means you make amends and you take on whatever you need to make it right.
your side
So
of
think about if you commit a crime. Okay, you go to the judge and you're like, but I confessed my sins. I said I was sorry for doing it. Not my sins, but you know what I mean? I confessed
yeah.
like what I did. I said I was sorry for doing it. And the judge is like, okay, cool, but now you have to serve 5 to 10. And they're like, but wait, then what? And the judge is like, yeah, that's how you have to be held accountable for this. Someone has to be held accountable.
Mhm.
Anytime you hear that, is whenever you hear that in the court of law and someone's held accountable, that means that there is some like reparation made. There
Yes,
is some mending that has to
yes,
happen afterwards.
yes,
So
yeah.
that's the second piece to it, is like making it right. It's more
Mhm.
than just an apology. Full accountability is doing then what it takes to make it right.
Mhm. Absolutely. And this is just something that none of us were really taught, right? So unless you're like very committed to learning how to do things differently, a lot of this stuff is unconscious and we don't even know that we're doing it or not doing it, right? We don't know. We've been taught, oh, I did something wrong, say sorry. Okay, done. But it's like, no,
Exactly.
if you want to actually repair it, so that you can clear it so that it doesn't come up again, because what will happen is it will come up again. And it's a process, right? So first you have to even become aware of your patterns, right? So like Teal, you were talking about, doing an inventory of yourself. Like, I mean, there's been moments in my life where I've been very like me, and I didn't even know that I was doing it. And it was a survival pattern. And
Exactly.
thank God now I have more awareness around it, and I can check in with myself moment to moment of like, maybe just be quiet. Maybe just listen to this person, right? Like maybe give them some airtime, because I have like a big personality. Like I just be like, and it's like, but maybe just like, breathe and be quiet for a little bit, right? And so all of these pieces, just as they become illuminated, it's a process, but we can learn how to navigate them in a different way and truly repair. Because a lot of people, when they come to me, by the time they come to me, it's like it's been years of a dynamic and so much has been shoved under the rug that it's like all underneath the rug. And so there were moments where this process could have occurred, but it didn't, because they didn't have the tools or the awareness or whatever. So now we have to go back and kind of clean up each little thing. And it's not like every single thing, but it's the themes, because there's going to be a set of themes. Like every relationship has a dance, right? Every dynamic has a dance. So we want to look at the themes that are showing up and go back and clean up and fully clear them, so that you don't keep shoving it under the rug, because it's going to come out in some way. Like you're going to trip over the rug eventually,
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And this is why a key component too with narcissistic versus narcissism is this a pattern that keeps happening? Or are there just certain times and certain situations where this happens? And that's what happens is people that just display narcissistic behaviors, it might come up around a certain subject that they find difficult to take accountability. Maybe it's a specific person that it's hard for them to take accountability. It's not a constant. It's not like a majority of their life. Where someone who actually has a narcissistic personality, it's the majority of their life that they just don't do this, that they can't take accountability. Doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter the situation. It doesn't matter the time of year. They won't do it, and they can't do it.
And they're just not capable. And I mean, and we don't know, right? Are they a narcissist? Or are they not? Because there's other people in my life that like are not able to take accountability as well. And I wouldn't classify them as narcissists, but it's like, when you think about this work, right? I love how you said humility is the opposite of, what did you say? Humility is the opposite of
the ego.
The ego, right? So like the fear mind, the ego. So if we think about like our patterns that we have that are maladaptive, right? They're protection patterns that we needed for a long time in order to survive in whatever our environment was, right? So if someone's incapable of anything, like connection, conversation, being accountable, like it just means, like you said, their protection is so strong that it's like hacking the security system at Fort Knox. Like we're not going to get in there. So depending on the level of trauma, like the level of protection is going to be, higher. And so we just want to go really easy. And I have certain processes that I teach my clients of how to navigate this in a very gentle, loving way. And so if you have two people that are willing, you can learn how to communicate in a way that really creates a whole new pattern in the brain of safety and of communication and relating. But if you're, opposite someone who is not capable or able to, you won't be able to practice that.
Exactly. And that's why looking for these patterns and paying attention to this is helpful. And the more you look at it in yourself and you clear it away from yourself, it's a lot easier to tell in another person, because when you have clarity and you don't do that, you have no problem calling somebody else out. When someone else is doing something, you will call it out, but then you'll be like, ooh, but that would mean I have to change too.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to just like kind of accept this behavior so that I don't have to change as well. And that happens a lot, very subconsciously too, within people, where they'll be like, yeah, but I also do that, so I can't really help them. So when you stop doing those things, stop acting in that way, you clear up your side of the street, you can have you gain a lot of clarity, and then you gain a confidence in being able to walk away from it, because you're like, yeah, I don't do those things. I don't treat people that way. I'm accountable. I'm not cool with this behavior.
Yes. And other things come into play, because these types of relationships create a very addictive energy where it's like you're playing at your trauma basically and trying to have a resolution with something that isn't going to have one.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so it's
Because you need accountability.
yeah, so there's not going to be one, but it ignites this like deep, this wound that's like, but maybe this time this person that could show up, like when I was little, you know, people couldn't show up and weren't accountable, but maybe this time, maybe this person will, right? And so our nervous system can kind of keep trying and bang your head against the wall. And it's really painful because it's hitting on very deep core wounds that we have, because we wouldn't be in this situation if we didn't have those wounds to begin with, right? So and it's interesting because like for me, I mean, when I finally got out of this, I was like, I was attached to the person, like my attachment to the person was still there, but my rational mind was like, this is not healthy, and this is like this is not going to get any better. But there was a part of me, the wounded part, that still wanted the connection, right, and the resolution that was never going to happen. So
that brings me to the next point, though. So there is a thing. So the next factor in it is their relationships with people. So someone with NPD their behaviors will continuously negatively impact all of their relationships.
Yes.
So you'll notice that they don't really have positive relationships.
Yep.
And that things will seem positive in the beginning and then constantly turns negative. Like that's what's constantly happening with them. They have very few healthy, constant relationships in their life. And it's always like the crazy ex, or I don't talk to this so-and-so anymore. And granted, big difference again in there's people like you and I don't talk to you, but that has more to do with incompatibility, a mutual like breaking apart of like, hey, this isn't going to work anymore, or they weren't healthy for us because of how they were mistreating us. Like, hey, we're not saying that. This is a pattern of behavior where throughout their life, you notice they can't hold healthy relationships. And the reason being is because they manipulate.
Yeah.
So a narcissistic person will use a lot of manipulation.
Yes.
A lot of that happens with love bombing and gaslighting. Things. And I want to talk about love bombing specifically because there was a video that I saw recently. I think I sent it to you. And this woman she's talking about people with NPD. And so everyone in the comments was like, not everyone's a narcissist, like going all this up. She was talking specifically about people with NPD. And she said a narcissist will intentionally love bomb the person they're with to get them to this insane state of elation, like the highest of high.
Yeah.
So the person is just like, oh, feeling all this high, like I'm special, all these things, right? They will get them to that state. And then once they have them there, they will keep dropping, and they'll never bring them back to that state again. That is how you create an addict. That is how you create trauma bonds. So I get really frustrated because people will constantly be like, oh my God, we trauma bonded over this. And it's like, ooh, that's not what that means. Bonding over shared trauma is not a trauma bond. Being so bonded and so attached through trauma, the tactic of causing emotional, relational trauma, then you cause a bond. That is a trauma bond. And that happens in narcissistic, true NPD relationships constantly, because someone who is truly a narcissist will use that tactic to keep you there. They will give you that insane high, pull away, and then you don't know if you're going to get it back again. And that's why you have this strong attachment, or, you want to go back to them, because it literally becomes like a drug, and they will be doing it intentionally, because the crazy thing about someone with NPD is like, they're really observant. They notice everything. They are constantly watching everything. And so they'll be able to tell, like, how much more do I need to give her? Oh, okay, just a little bit more and I got her, and now I can pull away. Or, ooh, him, I just have to make him feel bad for me, or make him like with me and do this and come to my rescue, and I'll get him again, and then I'll disappear, right? And they'll do that intentionally. Now, someone who it just has narcissistic behaviors or is emotionally immature might do these same things unintentionally.
Yes.
And it's because of their insecure attachment, like fearful avoidance, for example. A fearful avoidant person will be really, really intense and be like, yes, I really like this person. And then maybe pulled away hard because of their avoidance. They're
Mhm.
two very different.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And people like who are not, clinical narcissists, but are showing up in a similar way, often they just don't have the tools, right?
Exactly.
Like, they don't have this, and they don't know another way. And basically, we repeat what we witnessed in our homes and experienced until we learn another way. Otherwise, it just goes down the line, and that's how the trauma gets passed down. But for anybody watching, right, I really want, like, because I think there can be a lot of shame because people don't understand if you haven't been in a relationship like this, right? Like I was in one years ago that was like, I mean, it's so clear now. And even my parents were like, I think this guy's a narcissist. And I was like, oh, but couldn't have told me. I was like head over heels, in this fantasy from like the love bombing phase and all these things. Anyway, now, so years later, I ended up in a relationship with another narcissist that was a covert narcissist.
Mhm.
And I am still having a hard time. Like, how did that happen? Right? Like I have so much awareness and knowledge, and I've done and done a lot of work around all this, and it's still happened. And it's like the level of manipulation, right, is like insidious. And that itself is a survival strategy, right? It's like how they've learned to survive. So and looking back on it, I can see where like there were different strategies kind of implemented that like didn't work. And then he would like kind of go back into his corner and then come back with a new strategy. And he finally found a way in, right?
Mhm.
And I know, I mean, and also, I need to look at my instinct when I first saw this person was, oh no.
Ooh.
In my brain, oh no is what came through, right? My wounded part wanted the connection because then he was showing up in this different way. And I was like, I must have been so wrong about this person. Like, so if you're in a situation like this, right? Please don't blame yourself because it's like subtle and it gets, more and more and more.
They're masters at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've mastered it their whole lives.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they don't have the level. One, they specifically go for people who are going to raise their self-esteem a lot. So it is people that are intelligent, emotionally intelligent, empathetic, and kind and
Yeah.
caring. Like they want to be around the best because they have this inflated sense of self. Like they want the best. So like they want to be around people who they think are, better and who are going to, give them some type of
Yeah.
status.
Yes.
Okay.
Status.
So it is a, it isn't like, oh, you're this weak person. No, they go for someone who's just incredibly kind and empathetic,
Yeah.
who slowly over time they're able to manipulate. And again, it's because of that tactic of love bombing.
Yeah.
It isn't normal in relationships when you immediately meet someone for this person to just be like, oh my God, you're so
Yeah.
this and this, and I need to spend every moment with you, and you're so special, and I've never felt this way. Dude, this is one thing I will say. I was just talking to a friend on the phone about this. Is another thing a narcissist will do. They will tell you what they do
Yep.
before they do it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially if you know someone, say, well, it's like I dealt with this with a guy friend who would tell me, oh, look, I can like get this person. I do this with women, I do this. And like, actually, I shouldn't say a guy friend. It was a guy that I had seen in New York. And when I tell you he has to have been the most like blatant narcissist I've ever met, like it is wild, Jess, textbook, everything. Like it's so crazy. Everyone that knows him has been like, this dude is a like, and it's like, again, we hate to overuse that word, but they've said it like he is the most narcissistic person I've ever met in my life. He actually told me his tactics, and like negging is one of them, and not in like the fun, playful way. He told me, he said, I will specifically not give any attention to the girl that I like and to the prettiest girl in the room so that she wonders why I'm not giving her attention. He's like, I will give it to every other woman and not her on purpose.
Yeah.
And he would tell me other tactics that he would use. Then months pass by, this person starts giving me attention, love bombing me like crazy, FaceTiming me all the time, text me all the time, wants me around me all the time, everything. And then I start to believe, oh, I'm special. I'm different. Oh, look, see, actually, I'm not like the other girls. I'm different. He would tell me that, oh, you're different. You're special. I've never done this. And then lo and behold, once he thought he had me, because he sort of did, I got the real him. I got the ways that they do where they devalue you. The things
Yeah.
that they like to devalue. Then they
Yep.
start to pull that away. Then they
Mhm.
start to say things and degrade you in ways that they can. They don't
Yeah.
compliment you anymore, and they'll do backhanded compliments, or they'll gaslight you. They'll do these different things. And then it was very clear. I like woke up out of it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I know what this person's doing." And I
Mhm.
ran for the hills, blocked him.
Yeah.
Then was crazy enough to show up to places where he knew that and I know you deal with the same thing. He showed up to meetings where he knew I was going to. He called me out on it, and he's like, "Did
Yeah.
you?" And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah. And like I had to
Mhm.
kind of navigate around it because he was very that
Mhm.
egotistical that he was like, "How could you love
Mhm.
me?"
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know?
No, oh,
And
yeah.
I let him back into my life, and I shouldn't have. And then lo and behold, again,
Mhm. Yeah.
we're walking middle of Times Square. He just starts yelling at me, freaking out on me, calling me this horrible person, doing these things. And it would be this pattern. Again, it's a pattern.
Mhm.
It was like
Mhm.
every time I would hang out with him, he would be like Jekyll and Hyde. He'd be really nice, gassing me up, telling me
Yes.
how great I am. And then all of a sudden it
Yeah.
was like a switch, and it was like, I can't believe you just did that. And you'd always do this, you do that. And then I'd be like terrified, and I'd be like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay
It and it creates that addictive cycle, right? Because
now.
and if you guys are watching, and you want some resources on the addictive cycle of just relationships that are like this, I can send it to you. But it creates this addictive cycle. And for me, it was like very confusing because all he wanted was me to be his girlfriend, like every day, like, are you my girlfriend yet? Are you my girlfriend yet? And I'm like, what on earth? Like I was having to slow things down. And then, exactly what you're describing. Like, and then people would say to me, well, this is the real him. Right. And even people that are really close to me that knew both of us, like in our similar community, where they would be like, Jess, that guy is a freaking narcissist. Like you, and I was like, I don't know, because the wound, right? Like the wound just wants love so much. And so what we have to look at is the things within us that make us susceptible to that, right? So like, you know, listen to your gut, right? Listen to that moment where I was like, oh no. And then, I mean, oftentimes we don't have the best boundaries. Like if we don't have good, healthy, strong boundaries, then there may be moments where we're feeling like this really isn't okay, but we're still engaging because the wound is running the show, right?
Oh yeah.
And
And
a lot,
and that's those protection patterns. So that
yeah,
then we have, then our own protection patterns come up of, well, I don't want to be alone, so I'd
yeah,
rather have this than be alone, or I just want to feel special so bad.
right.
And
And that
so that's what keeps us hooked is
that's the hook. And it's like a piece of it is that we don't have a frame of reference for what a healthy love is and a healthy relationship is,
mhm.
because it's not this like pouring on of love. And there's this book, I can't remember what it's called, but it talks about like how to pimps
Mhm.
get hookers to like never leave them, basically, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it's a similar thing where it's like they spoil them, they give them gifts, they give them compliments, they make them feel like a queen, right? Then they beat the shit out of them and they never leave.
Yep.
And it's a similar thing, right? So if you're stuck in a dynamic like this, right? Like reach out, because it can be hard to unhook when your trauma's activated and this cycle keeps getting ignited over and over and over again. And and like you're saying too, I mean, once you do get out by the grace of God, then there's still the fact of like bumping into them, when they like
Oh yeah.
up.
Well, because there's two things that will end up happening is either we wise up and we leave them, or the narcissist decides you no longer have value to me anymore, so I'm
Yeah.
going to discard you. And that
Yeah.
is a word they use because it will be like that exactly, where it is, oh yeah, I don't want you anymore. I don't value you. You know what? You're not the same anymore. And it's funny because it will usually happen after you become a shell of a human being because of everything you've given them and how much they've beaten
Mhm.
you down. And they're like, yeah, no, you're not fun anymore. Like you used to be great, and I don't know what your problem is. And like they'll maybe say the things you don't do anymore, all the things that they told you to stop doing, that now you stop
Mhm.
doing, and then they're like, yeah, you don't do that anymore. So I'm done with you. Or they
Yeah.
just block you, right? It's like they're done with their toy, they're done having their playtime, and
Mhm.
they just need to move on to the next thing, the next
Mhm.
shiny, pretty thing. and they don't really care.
Mm-mm.
So that's the tough part. And so again, this is where you have to look at the pattern is this person that you're with, if they're displaying these behaviors, is this a pattern for them? Do
Mhm.
they do this? Do you notice them do this in other areas? Because I guarantee,
Mhm.
well, I shouldn't say guarantee. I would say this. It is most likely that you've noticed them do this stuff with other people before they did it to you, or you
Uh-huh.
notice them do it to other people while they're doing it to you. But because of the bond, because of this trap of this, the trauma bond and the addiction qualities, you think you're special or you think it's
Mhm.
different somehow.
Yeah.
Really, really, really pay attention to how these people treat other
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
that means they're capable of treating you the same way.
absolutely. And I remember I told you a story that this person had shared with me this very strange story.
Hmm.
And I like came and I told you and you were like, "Yeah, they tell on themselves." Like
Yes.
they tell on themselves. And I was like, the writing was really on the wall, right? But it was so interesting because the wound within me
Hmm.
wanted to kind of run into the burning building still.
Yeah.
And so, noticing that and having compassion for that part of like, maybe there's like a deep desire to be chosen, or like,
Mhm.
you haven't really felt like a healthy love before. So this is what you feel like love is with someone who's like inconsistent and up and down and back and forth. And so, being so gentle around what's brought you to this place. And then like it sucks, right? Like it's super painful, but it can be the moment where you get so clear. Like with
Oh,
my, now, oh my gosh, you become like a narcissist detector. Cause like,
it's so true. You see it. But so this is the tough part. And at the end, I want to go through the characteristics of like what
yeah,
they do. But the tough part is I'm attracted to some of the characteristics and it
yes,
sucks. I am just
yeah.
like, it is something I've been actively working on where I'm like, how do I become unattracted to this? How can I, this is where doing the inner work in myself has been helping,
Mhm.
where noticing my own narcissism, working through my own protection patterns, cleaning up my side of the street, really like, making amends where I need to. I'm about to go make another one.
Mhm.
Like where it's just like, okay, how can I keep clearing, 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 clearing?
Yeah.
Because the more that I do that,
Mhm.
the less I'm attracted to these behaviors
Yes.
because I don't have to feel worse or better about myself because I'm just okay with myself. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we're attracted to this type of behavior because it's giving us a false sense of superiority or we want to feel inferior. So
Mhm.
it's helping us it's serving us in either of those two ways. And this is why this need to feel special
Mhm.
is very dangerous because for us sometimes it means like, oh, but no one understands them. I
Mhm.
understand them the best,
Yeah.
or I'm so empathetic, I can handle it. Like
Mhm.
that's a lie constantly of like, it's okay, I can handle it. And look, no one else can handle it. That's why they left them or they don't have good relationships. Is that just because no one can handle it? I'm
Mhm.
stronger, I'm different, I'm more empathetic, I can handle it. And that's from our own sense of, you know, what happened in our childhood where
Mhm.
maybe we believe that we can't get our needs met. Like you said, wanting to be chosen and not choosing ourselves. So we push
Mhm.
against
Mhm.
our needs, not having proper boundaries, or just gaslighting ourselves into believing that that's what being
Mhm.
special means and
Yeah.
that we are willing to do that for them. But like I've said, these are all behaviors that lead to unhealthy relationships. So
Yeah.
someone who is truly a narcissist will not have healthy relationships.
No, no. And like you said, you can just look at like a really interesting thing that happened with one of the men that I dated was like I got out of it somehow, which was a miraculous thing. But it got to the point it was extremely dangerous. Like
Yeah,
there was like legal things happening. Like it was no joke.
yeah.
And my status in this country was being threatened because I'm Canadian. So it was no joke. But we get out of it and he doesn't stop, doesn't stop, doesn't stop, right? He said to me, if you ever end things like I'm done, it was the exact opposite. Try for months. And my therapist told me, she's like, you tell him one time, I'm done. Do not contact me again. From then on, do not react to anything he does, anything, which was really scary because I didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah,
Like,
very raw.
it, yes. And I wanted to talk about that too. So, but what happened, which is wild, right? Because sometimes we might think, like back then, I was like, well, is this me? Like, I started to see it though, because your intuition knows things. Like, there were moments where I was like, this is something not right here. And there were more and more, and they got louder and louder. But all this to say, years later, like it was like 3 years ago, I'm like, da, 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 like at my job working, I check my Instagram and I have this message from this woman who was the woman that he dated after me. And she ended up marrying him. And long story short, exactly the same situation on steroids, because she married him and it ended with him being in jail, like, and her leaving. So I was like, holy shit, like that I escaped that. And she thought it was her. She was like, it's me, it's me. And this woman, so sweet, so compassionate. Like, so guys, don't blame yourself, and also look at, you know, the parts that you need to look at around boundaries and self-worth and like choosing yourself and self-abandonment. But like, it was wild. And she was like, her lawyer found some of the documents, the legal documents with me and him. And that's how she knew to contact me. So it was like a super healing conversation. But these people don't change. Like, and it actually gets worse and worse and worse. So there is no going back to that, you know, beautiful love bomby feeling. Like, it feels beautiful, but that love bomby connection, you never get back there.
No, and that's why it's like a drug, is you're just chasing the dragon for the rest of the time. And the reason they get you to that point that's so high is they want that to be your initial impression of them, is I'm the person that gets you that high. You've never been that high before. I'm the person that gets you that high. So what happens is you felt that euphoria, they pull it away, and then you know that that's where I get euphoria again. So you keep going back to it, but you never feel as euphoric as you did the first time. It's just like people, you know, that have done drugs with like heroin or something. They're all just trying to get that first high. That gets up to that first high, and it's like you need more, and it's never the same. And instead, it just continues to break down your body, and it continues to become more and more unhealthy. And that's exactly why they use that tactic. And before you know it, you're stuck and you're addicted. And when you start to notice that, that's why love bombing is a big, big indicator in the beginning. Again, like I said, there's other factors. Like it could just be like excitement and people that are emotionally mature, but just try and this is where doing your own work, having your own boundaries prevents that from happening. Me, I noticed my best thing is seeing someone once a week. And because I get so excited, my own attachment issues, that I don't want to inadvertently love bomb someone. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like I've done work on my own behaviors, just because I'm like, I can do this sometimes inadvertently because of my attachment stuff. Do different. That. It's different. It's different. Right? And so I noticed that is something I need to do. Now, the last factor is context and time. And so we've kind of talked about that in our stories and whatnot. But when it comes down to, is this person actually NPD or are they just narcissistic? It's contextual and it's over time. So is this in every context of their life or majority of their life, or just a certain context that you notice someone's narcissistic? Is it just certain times? We've said this, like, can they not apologize, or are they manipulative, or whatever? With certain people that happens. Or maybe you've seen this where, especially because you're in 12 steps, where someone seems highly narcissistic. We might think like they're a narcissist, and they work the steps. They're a lovely person. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. So that's an example of like someone who was trapped in narcissistic behaviors because they didn't have other tools. And then there's other people where the more and more you get to know them, or longer and longer in their life, it gets worse and worse. The wall goes up more, it gets thicker, and it's become a pattern. And so there's basically the way that they diagnose, and I want to share this, is there's 9 different areas that they look at. And someone who will be diagnosed with NPD, they have to have 5 of these, and it needs to be over a long period of time. So this is like long term. So it's grandiosity, or a sense of self-importance, fantasies about power and success, a sense of entitlement, limited insight, we're talking about they can't do like the inner work, a constant need for admiration and praise, use of manipulation tactics to take advantage of others, 7, limited or poor empathy, 8, competitiveness, distrust, and jealousy, and then the last one, scorn and arrogance toward others. So they need to have 5 out of the 9. and
Yeah.
it needs to be consistently over a period of time.
Mm.
And so it says symptoms generally must present across most area of life.
Mm.
But
Yeah, that's a good list.
yeah,
That's a
it's
good
really less. This is basically what someone says is for a diagnosis of MPD to occur, there must be a pervasive and long-term pattern of grandiosity, lack of empathy for others, inflation of a person's own abilities, and symptoms generally must be present across most areas of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And just use it as a gauge, right? Because whether the person's like actually a narcissist or not, if there's a lot of these traits showing up and there's no progress, no willingness to self-reflect, no, doing any kind of inner work on themselves, then you want to get really honest with yourself. And it can be challenging to unhook if you have like attachment wounding or abandonment wounding, because they will know what your wounding is and like do this to it,
Mm-hmm.
to like, that's what was happening with me. He kept like doing this to my specific abandonment that would make me reach for him, and I was like, oh my god, this is almost like a subconscious program that I have, right? And luckily, it was a few months, and thankfully, because of the work that I've done, and I'm so grateful. But even the fact that I was in it in the first place, I still have to have compassion, because I'm still like, what the fuck? But
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it's because they're in survival mode, right? Like
yeah.
because their ego has to survive because they don't want to get down into their trauma. They don't want to get down into all of those feelings, the shame, the guilt, the trauma. So their ego is on overdrive all the time, noticing every little thing to protect itself. It's on high alert. So they notice it. And it's funny. It's the guys in my life that I would put money on would get diagnosed with MPD. There's only about like 3, like I said, I put money on that are like for sure that all of them have been so insanely observant and paid attention to details and paid attention to little things about me. And and a lot of it was psychological behaviors or like the way that I moved and acted, and they would pay attention to everyone else. And it was interesting because again, I was like, oh wow, they made me feel so special because they noticed that about me.
Yeah.
Oh, look, they're so considerate because they notice these little things. And it's like, no, those things then they would take and
Yes.
you and do it, and then it would not turn out to be a good thing anymore. It was a tactic, and it was like, and now I pick up on that. Now I'm noticing more of like, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities where they were just using that against me. They were using that to hook me, and then they would use it against me.
Yeah. And it's actually it's really sad when you think about it, because it's like, that's the way they're relating to others in the world. Like, they actually don't have the capacity to relate from a heart-centered place. So it's all these manipulation tactics. And so, as painful as it is, we can actually do the work around healing so that we can have a different connection and relationship. And like you said before, touching on like, no one's ever made me feel this way or whatever. I fell into that category. I'm like, but I've never had this amount of like chemistry with anyone. And guess what? I have now. It's like, it's me. It's me. It's you.
It's you. I know.
You're the magic. You're the magic. Yeah. It's not the other person. So like, if you have this level of chemistry with this person, you can have that level of chemistry with someone healthy. You actually can.
Joe said that to me. So Joe said that to me with the last guy. I had said, I'm like, no, but Joe, I'm telling you, like, it's wild. I was so open with this person. I felt so safe with them. It was the first time that I could fall asleep next to somebody. And like, we had this insane connection. And Joe was like, yeah, but is that them? Or is that just a testament to how much work you've done on yourself and how much you've grown as a person?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, snap. Okay, that's what that is how much I've grown as a person to where I'm able to open up and do all of that. And it does have somewhat to do with him, but it had more to do with all of that. And this is again why it's when you're noticing these tactics, yes, you can recognize this and do a little bit of analyzing, but once you start to notice this, ask yourself, what do I need to do within myself so that I'm no longer attracted to this, or that I can step away from this, and that I don't want this anymore. Because I know for me, the things of like the traits of grandiosity or arrogance, those would be the things that I would find like really funny about these
Mhm.
guys. I would find it hilarious, or I'd be like attracted to it. And then I notice it's because of my own lack of self-confidence,
Mm, mhm.
and then I would go for these guys that are really, really controlling. That's another thing, is they tend to be controlling. And it's like, why
Mm,
do I want to be controlled? Like, what is it that's in me? So I've had to do journaling and writing
mhm,
and work around this to
mhm.
understand, like, why do I have a desire for these things? Like, what is it that they're
Mhm.
touching on? What wound are they touching on? Are they
Yes.
how are they serving me in some way?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then again, how do I get what would my life look like if I didn't do this anymore and I wasn't attracted to them?
Yeah, because life, like this is the thing. Life, God, whatever word you want, loves you so much. It's going to keep showing you what you need to look at to heal. And
Mhm.
so if it's through this relationship, it's through this relationship. That's like direct access point into the wound that needs your attention, right? So what my coach was having me do, she was like, you know, separate it into like my higher self would want this for me.
Yeah.
My wound is, having a hard time detaching,
Yeah.
right? Because and also thinking about too, like how much of it is actually this person, because I was like, I wanted a relationship, and I wanted like the physical affection and someone to talk to every day, and it's like, well, you can have that with a person who is more healthy.
Yeah.
This is just you just want a relationship. That's like, you don't want this specific person, you
Mhm.
want a relationship, right? So getting really honest with yourself around like what's even keeping me here, and then get really clear on like what are the qualities that you desire to have in partnership, and then start fostering those within yourself, right? So having healthy boundaries, honoring yourself, like choosing what your higher self would want for you, even if your wound is like, but I still want the connection, right? And this is the work, this is the deep work that, I mean, most of us need support around doing,
Yeah.
because it's challenging to navigate on your own, because you get like hijacked by the old wound or by the
Oh,
energy or
yeah.
by the yeah.
And you have
So
to detox. This is the wild thing, and we haven't fully talked about this, is like, if you are dealing with a person who does the love bombing and you have that bond and you've got this strong attachment, it feels like you can't breathe when you're not around them.
yeah.
Like, and there's detox symptoms. It is actual, that in SLA, they talk about it.
Yeah.
When you do no contact, or when you're doing, like, I did 90 days no men, I have a whole
Mhm.
series of it on my TikTok if anyone wants to watch. I vlogged it, and I talk about what my experience was when I went 90 days not talking to any men. You have physical detox
Mhm.
symptoms
Yes.
that
Yeah.
are similar to coming off of drugs. You
Oh yeah.
can sleep, your hunger's messed up, you get migraines, you get physical body pain.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
you have similar symptoms. And
Mhm.
that's why, again, if like you're going through, like, this isn't easy, it can be, it's simple. It's simple, right? Like the stuff that you need to do. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily easy,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
a lot that we have to deal with in ourselves in order
Yeah.
to get away from people like this.
Yeah. And that can even happen, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, we're talking about a 12-step program that we're in called SLAA. And I did the same thing. I did 90 days, and I actually did more like, 4 months, because I had a little blip in there. So then I had to start over again. But of no men. But it even if it's not a narcissistic relationship, you can still have this like attachment, and then when there's a separation, you go through a withdrawal that's like physical in your body. So both of us have personal experience with this, and I support a lot of clients in walking through that as well, because it's very real. Like I've even heard people in the rooms who've come off of drugs say that like this is just as intense, if not maybe worse, than the withdrawal from coming off of certain drugs. So it's a physical, visceral experience in the body that's happening. So we need to
Yeah.
go easy and be super gentle and allow that healing. And it's like this sacred time where it's very, very uncomfortable, but so worth it. Like I'm so glad that I did that space without any men.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
see, we learn a lot, and this is the work that you and I do with our clients.
yeah.
You work with them in a relational way. You have your coaching sessions, and with me, I work with them in an embodiment way,
Mhm.
where I'm working with people to teach them how to handle this type of
Mhm.
detox process, like how to get through it, how to
Mhm.
handle all of this sudden these feelings coming up. how to use breath work to try and calm your nervous system, like how to be able to handle, safe touch and how to get through all this stuff again. And
Yeah.
this is why we do what we do, is to help
Yeah.
people. We both know what it's been like, as you could tell from listening, our own
Yeah.
experiences. And fortunately, we now have tools and we have tactics. And so we hope that you've been able to get something from this episode today, where we're talking about, is everyone a narcissist? And I just want to recap. So just to recap everything we talked about, that the difference between narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits is that for NPD to be present, symptoms must manifest across most areas of their life, and they must remain stable over time. So narcissistic traits, though, may only appear in certain contexts or at different times. And where is it? What was I going to say? Oh, narcissism is a personality trait many live with, and it only becomes evident occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a formal mental health condition with persistent symptoms that significantly impact the quality of life. You may have some narcissistic traits without meeting the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Or you end up, having them over those 9 different categories like we talked about, and you hit 5. And it's, like you said, no accountability, and then you have them over a long period of time. So again, we just wanted to recap that everyone has narcissistic personality traits, but what is it to really look like a full-blown narcissistic, person? And then how can you kind of get away from that and protect yourself? And then also what to look for in a partner that, is going to be healthy.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And also too, that, you can heal. So the emotional immaturity can show up with just like fragmented parts of self because of trauma experiences. So that's different. And that's how you can see too, like within yourself, like, has there been progress over time? Are you showing up differently? And that kind of thing. So it's all learning. It's all learning. But if you guys need support, please reach out. We're here. We want to help. And we really understand like the impact of having these kinds of experiences. And we want to support you if you're walking through something like this, or you've just gotten out of something recently and you're needing help navigating that. So please reach out to us, and we'll be back again next week.